All right, guys, so we're off and running. My apologies for this. Okay, so hello from Houston, Texas. We've got a big plume of dust that's come in from the Saharan desert, and it's somehow causing me a lot of congestion. So if I get weird voice and wobbly, you know why that's occurring. Welcome to Designing Online Courses, a New Approach. We are delighted to share our ideas with you today, which we believe are even more relevant now than when we first proposed the session. First, a word about the new approach. We believe that our approach to designing online courses is new and innovative. While you will notice as we go through the session, some of the elements will be quite familiar to you, others will be new. The way we have integrated and synthesized the familiar and the new leads to this innovative new approach for designing your online courses. We hope by the end of the session you find this approach provides you with some ideas worthy of reflection, and that you also discover colleagues to share ideas with. And there's lots of colleagues on this session, so you should be able to find somebody you can connect with, as well as us. We love connecting with people. We find it exciting that this is a synchronous session. What better way to experience what we're discussing about designing online courses than to do this session online? The information presented is informed by our research and ultimately resulted in our book, The New Roadmap for Creating Online Courses, an Interactive Workbook, which was co-authored by the presenters of this session. Before we begin, we want to make you aware that this session is being recorded. In addition, we ask that you make sure your mics are muted unless you're speaking. And if you're willing and technology permits, please share your video at least at the beginning so we get to know each other through this journey together. We recognize that bandwidth and other issues may prevent you from sharing, but regardless, we are delighted you chose to join us for this session. Okay, as you look at the overview, you will see this pretty typical of most conference sessions, with interaction built in through introductions, self-reflection, dialogue, and content. Specifically, we will cover adult learning principles and the Change-adept Course Creation Process. I know most of you, if not all of you, have been using Zoom or something similar for meetings and perhaps for your classes. In this session, you will experience the way we have interspersed topics and presentations with self-reflection and dialogue. So please be prepared to participate. We will start with the session destination, which is the overarching goal. Through self-reflection and dialogue with colleagues, you can begin to apply adult learning principles to your online course design using the Change-adept Course Creation Process. To give you plenty of time to reflect and dialogue with others during this session, we are asking you to go to chat and to provide your name, your institution, and identify one question you have about creating online courses. As we go through this session, look for the answers to your questions. You will find the chat and the toolbar, which should be at the beginning, at the bottom of your screen. So if you hover over it, you should be able to click on chat and make your comments. You will see, so you can type in the introduction and then peruse other people's introductions. You may want to keep the chat open as we go through this session to make comments and ask questions. At the end of the session, we ask you to consider whether or not your answers or your questions have been answered, and if not, to let us know during Q&A. While you are introducing yourselves in chat, my co-presenters and I will tell you a bit about ourselves. My name is Janet McCollum, and as previously mentioned, all of us co-authored the book, The New Roadmap for Creating Online Courses, an Interactive Workbook. Currently, I'm director of the Quality Enhancement Plan, or QEP, and Core Assessment, also known as General Ed Assessment, at the University of St. Thomas in Houston. I have many years' experience in teaching online as well as face-to-face in both business and education. In addition, I have consulted with and trained faculty to develop online courses. I am a recipient of the Blackboard Online Exemplary Course Award, and with my colleague, Catherine Barber, have received the Blackboard Teaching and Learning Award. In the past, I've held numerous training and development leadership positions in a variety of organizations and have published articles and book chapters on teaching and learning and organizational change. Now Catherine will introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Catherine Barber, and I'm a psychologist and an associate professor in the School of Education and Human Services at the University of St. Thomas. My experience with creating and teaching online courses has led to 3 awards from the Blackboard Corporation, and also to numerous presentations and publications in peer-reviewed journals. And now Wendy will introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Wendy Maboudian. I'm a senior instructional designer at the University of St. Thomas. I've worked in both education and industry to design online adult learning. I earned my doctorate in curriculum and instructional technology, and my endeavor has been to discover methods that engage and enhance the online learning experience. I believe that immersion in an engaging learning environment where reflection, community discussion, and realistic practice truly lead to a deeper understanding and learning, shared understanding, and designing realistic experiences for student practice is unique to each instructor with whom I work. Janet?
Okay, now let's take a quick look at what y'all have posted to chat. Unfortunately, I have my access to chat has gone away, so my colleagues will take a look at that and kind of highlight some of the things that you guys have written. And
sure, I'll chime in. So I was sort of looking at the chat a bit while my colleagues were introducing themselves, and if there's one word that I see repeated the most frequently, it's engagement. So a lot of you were looking for ways to engage your students. Certainly there are other questions as well about maybe a few more technical things too, like about how to create videos and things of that sort, all of which are fantastic questions. We may or may not get to some of those aspects. We probably won't be focusing on the technical parts today, more on the design aspects. But we welcome your ongoing conversation and reaching out to us too. Wendy, anything you want to add?
Yes, for the question from Paul about getting used to another LMS, going from Blackboard to Moodle, it's just a matter of getting used to it. So I did the opposite, went from Moodle to Blackboard, went through sharing the same feeling and just keep looking for the good things about it. The images that you can use, the whole layout in Moodle can become very exciting. Just give it a little bit of time, it'll grow on you. And let's see, enhancing curriculum. Wanda, that's a question that you're going to see us address as we go through, and then I'd like to return to this at the end if we can, or talk to you further about it.
okay, so I'm really frustrated. I'm sorry, guys, that I can't see your chat because I know you have some awesome
you might have to reopen
comment.
it if you can find the menu item. It's lost up where it says sharing screen. It's up in there. You probably have to just reopen it, or it might be hidden behind your window.
Or the host of
I can see the toolbar, but let's not. This is my problem, not you guys, and I know we've got things to cover, so I'm going to proceed, and maybe it'll pop up eventually. We'll see. Okay, so moving on. To take advantage of the synchronous nature of this session, we will include time for you to self-reflect and dialogue with others, to share ideas through a combination of whole group and small group activities. As you dialogue with each other, identify ways to apply your ideas to your online courses. Also, as you go through the session, look for ways we incorporate the adult learning principles, which Catherine will cover in a minute, and consider how the Change-adept course creation process was utilized. And Wendy will cover that shortly. We are now familiar with how to use the chat to communicate with each other. One feature also that we will be using is raised hand. So before we move on, let's review how to use the Zoom raise hand feature, which is found in the toolbar under participants. So if you'll go to the toolbar, click on participants, you'll see the hand icon. So if you're willing, practice raising your hand by clicking on raised hand, and then you can lower your hand. Excellent. Wow, it looks like you got the hang of this, guys. So that's great. So hang on to that knowledge. We will use it in just a minute. So thank you. And the next piece is self-reflection. So what we want you to do is self-reflect first on an opportunity you were given when you began creating and teaching online courses and how you felt about that opportunity. Identify one action you took to realize this opportunity, and then post your reflection in chat and be prepared to share your reflection. Now, you may be wondering about why we use the word opportunity when this initially may not have seemed like one. Remember appreciative inquiry. By thinking in terms of opportunity, we have been given, as we create and teach our online courses, our perspective of the situation can change from one of a difficult situation we've been thrown into to one of opportunity, where we may find more energy and excitement as we modify or explore new approaches as we create our online courses. This can translate into more effective courses that may better meet our students' needs as well as our own. Note that this is not Pollyanna thinking, but is grounded in the research around the language of appreciative inquiry. And as you learn more about inclusion and of diverse students later in this presentation, think back to appreciative inquiry language and how it might fit with inclusion. Now take a minute, if you haven't already, to review your colleague's post, and then and again, I still can't see, so, unless it's come up. So as you're doing that, then for comments you would like to make, maybe things that you see that are general, that people are questions or experiences that people have had, something you would like to explain a little more, just raise your hand and we will recognize you as you.
I'm responding to Amy, who noticed that those students who posted regularly were different from those who spoke up in class. For instance, English as a second language student was very vocal on discussion boards. That's a really important observation, and I believe it holds true. So having a combination of different ways of students expressing themselves really helps.
Okay, Catherine and Wendy, again, I can't see, so you guys
Sure.
are gonna have to handle
Well,
this.
I'm thinking perhaps our participants can review what's in the chat, and then if anybody wants to speak a little bit more about their experience or share something that they've noticed in terms of the chat. Janet, are you able to see people's raised hands?
I can, I think. Oops.
And Natasha, I see that you figured out ways very quickly when the COVID-19 sent everyone online of cross-cultural engagement. And you're going to notice that we'll discuss semiotics as we go along. Very good observation to offer us. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Are y'all seeing any others? Because I'm blind here.
Yes, there's quite a few.
Chantal was inspired with the students who made the change to online and were still very intent on learning.
Something I've seen in some of these responses is understandably some of the frustrations that have come up too. So the amount of time that it takes to get a course, that it can take to get a course put online or even to be approved to teach online. You know, the challenges of creating videos and other sorts of resources and having access to links. Navigating the LMS and kind of figuring out its capabilities as well, the issue of academic integrity and students cheating and so forth. And so I think that, you know, this opportunity that going online presents us is certainly not without its challenges.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably a good summary. Wendy, did you see some other comments that were being made? And then we'll move on.
Oh, there's so many rich ones, but for the sake of time, we might move on. But because we can scroll on the chat, we can go back and forth.
Some people can scroll. Okay, so this is good. Thank you guys for sharing. It sounds like these are awesome comments that you have made and very common across. And we have experienced them based on what Catherine and Wendy are telling me. We have experienced similar kinds of things. So keep these opportunities or challenges in mind as we present the adult learning principles in the next section. Catherine will discuss these principles. So think about your experiences so far in this session and how we have used the principles, as well as thinking about how you might use them as you create your online courses. Okay, Catherine?
Yes, and before I go through these principles or the overview of them, I just want to comment. People continue to make great comments in the chat, and we encourage you to do that, and certainly to review each other's comments too, because you all can learn as much from each other as you can from us. So I'm glad that that capability is here. So in this session, I'm going to briefly cover 4 learning principles. Our view of learning, which includes cognitive, social, and emotional aspects of learning. The learning process, which includes self-reflection and dialogue, the concept of creating realistic, relevant, and meaningful application opportunities for students, and techniques for inclusion of diverse learners. Next slide.
Sorry, I found chat.
All right.
It finally appeared.
Oh, great.
Okay. Sorry.
Yay.
That's quite all right.
Okay.
All right, so let's start with our view of learning. Every approach to course design begins, whether implicitly or explicitly, with the professor's view of learning. And before we share our view with you, I want you to just take a few moments to think about your own view of learning. For example, here are a couple of possible views that people might hold about their own role as the professor. Are you the expert who provides knowledge to adult learners who are responsible for learning what you give them? Or do you share your expertise with individuals who grow from your facilitation of self-reflection, dialogue, and applications? And how do you see your students' roles in your course? Do you believe your students attend college to actively acquire your knowledge? Or do your students share a learning experience that you design for them? And you don't have to post your answers in the chat just yet, although you're welcome to. Just think about this for a moment. What is your view of learning? How do you see your own role as a professor and your students' roles? And as you're thinking about this, maybe your view of learning is one that I've just described, or perhaps it's something else, but regardless of your specific view, we propose that learning involves 3 aspects: cognitive, social, and emotional. And all 3 aspects must be addressed for learning to occur. Let me give you an example. Think for a moment a bit more about your experience teaching remotely at the end of the spring semester. You certainly had academic content that you wanted to make sure that students learned and acquired, and this content or information was likely in the cognitive realm of learning. But at the same time, you and your students were grappling with the emotional fallout of the pandemic and having to move courses online. Some of you have shared in the chat your own experiences with some of the frustrations you felt. I'm curious about just whether you also experienced your students as having difficulty learning, whether their motivation decreased or appeared to decrease whenever they went online, Did everybody seem stressed out? All of these, although somewhat extreme, are examples of how emotional aspects of learning really do contribute either positively or negatively to overall learning. Since the brain doesn't waste energy thinking about and remembering what doesn't evoke personal emotion, whether anxiety or ambition or pride or engagement, it really is essential to build in the emotional aspects of learning into your course. And later in this session, Wendy's going to talk a little bit more about how to do that. As for the social aspect, you might have also found that when you stayed calm with your students and reassured them and checked in with them, that they felt better and performed better. And similarly, if your course had access to tools that allowed students to communicate with each other about the course material, this probably helped too. The social aspect of learning is often overlooked in adulthood, but it is extremely important. And we will discuss that a little bit more in the next learning principle too. So now that you've heard a bit about cognitive, social, and emotional aspects of learning, take a moment to self-reflect on how you integrate the cognitive, social, and emotional aspects of learning into your own courses. Think about any challenges you've faced with the emotional and/or social aspects in particular when teaching online. And be thinking about this because whenever we have a breakout session in a few minutes, we're going to ask you to discuss your self-reflection on this aspect of designing online courses. All right, Janet, the next slide. Oh, great, we're there. Okay, wonderful, thank you. So having heard about our view of learning, let's talk a little bit about the learning process. In our view, learning begins with self-reflection. So a learner is exposed to some information in a resource, whether that's a book or video or a website or some other source of information, and then self-reflects on the information, generating ideas, questions, and an initial understanding of the information. This self-reflection is a catalyst for the learning process in which the learner engages in a dialogue about the information with one or more people. Ideas are exchanged, questions are asked and answered, and insights emerge. From the dialogue, shared understanding occurs. And this dialogue is where true learning happens. Without the dialogue, learning is incomplete because learners have not checked their individual understanding against others' understanding of the information and come to a synthesis of perspectives. So let's make this a bit more specific again with an example. Think about the last time you learned something new. Maybe you decided to acquire a new skill during the pandemic, or maybe you were introduced to a new idea in a book or article. It's likely that you probably had some questions about the new skill or idea. So what did you do? Well, if you're like most adults, you probably turn to the internet or some other source of information for answers. However, unless the skill or idea was purely factual, that method of answering your questions probably left you unsatisfied. So what did you do next? I'm actually just noticing some responses in the chat, which is great, about weekly meetings with colleagues and so forth. You're right on track in terms of where I'm going too. I'm curious about, for others, did you call or email a friend or colleague to start a conversation? If so, what did you experience during the conversation? And did you gain new insights? Were your questions answered? Did new questions emerge? Did you and your conversation partner reach shared understanding? And if you did not reach out for dialogue, how did you really know that you understood the idea or had acquired the skill that you were working on? In other words, how did you get feedback? We propose that people need feedback in order to establish what they know and what they don't know. And we suggest, and research supports, that such feedback is most effectively acquired through dialogue. Furthermore, dialogue evokes those cognitive, social, and emotional aspects of learning. In dialogue, learners use the cognitive topic to launch discussion, which is a social interaction. And this interaction is also imbued with rich emotional responses. In short, there are numerous reasons to include dialogue in your online courses. And once again, when we get to the application part of this presentation with Wendy, she'll talk a little bit about that, about how to do that. All right, let's go on to the next slide. And I'll just mention a bit about adult learning assumptions. Again, I recognize that people are typing into the chat, and I greatly appreciate it. We will definitely get to your responses too. I'll just get through these principles first, and then we'll take a look at what people have to say. So in addition to our view of learning and the learning process, there are several assumptions about adult learning that underlie our process of creating online courses. You may ask, why are we emphasizing adult learners And we emphasize adults because, of course, this is the group we are teaching in higher education, although sometimes, myself included, sometimes professors forget that their college students are adults. So this is sort of a good reminder that we are working with adults and therefore need to think about adult learning. Although brain research suggests that the brain continues to develop well past the age of 17 or 18, this age is nonetheless considered the entry point to adulthood, at least by most Western cultures. And while the process of learning is basically the same in children and adults, adults have more experience than children do by virtue of their older age. They also typically have stronger expectations for their education, which are often shaped by previous educational experiences. Therefore, online course creation must acknowledge these expectations and meet adults' learning needs. The primary adult learning assumption that we focus on is that learning should involve realistic, relevant, and meaningful applications of knowledge and skills. Adult learners really like to know why they're learning something, what its value is, and how the learning connects with their own lives and goals. Therefore, learning that is experiential is particularly valuable for adult learners. And I know by virtue of your attending this conference that experiential learning is something that's quite familiar with most, if not all of you, familiar to most, if not all of you, but sometimes thinking about how to apply that online can be a little challenging. So once again, Wendy's got some good suggestions when we get to her part. In addition to experiential learning, even though learners often profess to dislike group work, they really do benefit from collaboration in learning. Much work in college in college and after college requires collaboration. And so adult learners need to know how to work with others, and university is a great time to practice that. In addition, adult learners benefit from being shown the connections among various topics and knowledge that they're learning. They also benefit from seeing connections between what they're learning and their own lives, whether personal or professional. So an online course needs to offer learners ways to apply their learning to realistic and relevant tasks that are personally meaningful. Now, you've heard a lot about adult learning assumptions just in the past couple of minutes. Take a moment to think about your own online teaching, whether you've been teaching online for quite some time or whether you are new to this experience and have sort of been thrust into it with the pandemic. What opportunities do you create or have you created for learners to engage in realistic, relevant, and meaningful applications of their knowledge and skills? And if this is not something you're doing now, if you haven't really yet figured out a way to incorporate those realistic, relevant, meaningful applications, what ideas do you have for creating such opportunities for application? Again, take a moment to self-reflect on this. If you'd like to type something in the chat, you may, but you can also hold your responses for whenever you have your breakout group in just a couple minutes. Okay, and the last learning principle, adult learning principle that I want to go over is the concept of inclusion and diversity. So inclusion refers to designing a course that will welcome and be accessible to all learners. Diversity refers to the varied personal and learning backgrounds that learners bring to a course. So to include diverse learners in an online course, we recommend that professors pay attention to semiotics. Now, what you may ask is semiotics. Some of you may be familiar with this term, others not. Semiotics refers to the study of the meaning of signs, symbols, words, and images. In a nutshell, paying attention to semiotics means recognizing that the words and images we use have diverse meanings. When we include an image in our course, for example, we need to be aware that the image may have different meanings to different students. By paying attention to the diverse ways in which learners may interpret our words and images, professors will be in a better position to make course design decisions that include all learners. Of note, inclusion also requires paying attention to our choices about who and what is represented in our course versus left out. We may forget that choosing certain images or information and so forth always involves an inherent choice to exclude certain images and information. So inclusion means striving to ensure that one's choices are representative of one's students and their needs. A related point that you'll see here on the slide, oops, if we could go back, there we go, is the concept of multimodal semiotics, which means that the synthesis of words and images can produce even more diverse interpretations. So to facilitate learners' understanding, it is important to provide clear information about the intended meaning of text and graphics. And in addition, providing information in more than one modality, such as video, audio, and text, will ensure that online courses are universally accessible. All right, so you've heard a lot now about kind of the foundation for our approach to designing online courses. It's time to get ready for dialogue about what you've just heard. So each of these questions represents one of the adult learning principles. We ask that you pick just one or maybe two of the following questions to reflect upon further and be prepared to share your reflections with your small group. And I'll mention that at the very beginning of the chat, whenever you go into your breakout rooms, you just have to scroll to the beginning, and I have posted these 4 questions at the top of the chat so you can have them available to you to refer to when you're in your breakout groups. Let's go through the questions just very quickly. The first is, how might you enhance cognitive, social, and emotional aspects of learning in your online course? Perhaps maybe focusing a little bit more on the social and emotional aspects, given that we're all fairly familiar with the and comfortable with the cognitive aspects. How do you integrate self-reflection and dialogue in your online course? What ideas do you have for realistic, relevant, meaningful activities? And how can you enhance your use of words and images in your online course to include diverse learners? All right, so these will be the questions. Again, pick one question to think about a little bit more and be prepared to talk about in your group. And Janet, if we can go to the next slide.
Sorry.
No, that's quite all right.
There.
Great, thank you. So I just want to talk a little bit about the logistics of these breakout groups. In a moment, you'll see a message inviting you to join a breakout room. You'll just click on join, and when you join the breakout room, you will be with a few other participants in this session. That makes, of course, dialogue a little bit more convenient and manageable. We'd like you to please share with your group your reflections on the question that you chose to answer. And if you need to review the questions, again, they're at the very top of the chat in your breakout room. The chat feature is also available for you to take notes on your small group discussion in your breakout room, but you will only be able to see, when you come back to the main room, you'll only be able to see the notes that your group took. So what we're going to ask is that each group select one group member to serve as the person to summarize the breakout room's conversation. And to facilitate this, the person who's going to be summarizing may want to type a quick summary in the breakout room chat. And when we come back, we'll tell you what to do with that summary. You'll have about 7 minutes to discuss your responses because we recognize that time is tight. And so we'll let you know when 1 minute is left. And at the end of that time, you will automatically be moved back into the main room. And one of us may come into your breakout room to see how you're doing. So just be aware that we may pop in at some point. All right, so I think we are ready for breakout rooms.
Okay. Okay. Okay, can y'all see an invitation going out?
No.
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 Great. Okay.
Where we
You would
used
need to open the rooms. I don't know if you see that feature at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's not letting me.
Okay.
Maybe you have to get out
I
of the
think it may be only the host can do it, not a co-host.
Stop screen sharing, Janet. Sometimes that blocks you.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Start this again. Okay. Breakout. Breakout. Got it. Okay. Open. This is so frustrating. Okay, so
until it isn't.
Brandon's there to help if you need.
okay, so options, automatic. Great. 7 minutes. Delete 7. Okay. Countdown. Okay. Great. Okay. Brandon, are you there?
I am here.
It's not working.
Do you want to transfer hosting abilities back to me?
Yep.
I'll see what I can do. I think yeah, I can't claim it. You have to give it to me.
Yeah. Okay, so that's under what? Sorry, guys.
Just go into participants, hover over my name, more, and then
More. Yeah, got it. Okay. Post. Yes. Okay.
I have the power. Okay, so what would you like?
So we
what's
wanted
your-
to automatically move people into the groups, probably about 6 or so in each group,
Okay.
and to come back in 7 minutes with
Okay.
a 60-second notification.
Sounds good. So it's 12, roughly, let's say 12:13 right now. We'll have Bill come back at 12:20 is when we'll close this out. I'm about to send everybody into their groups. So sayonara. Countdown time, 60 seconds. Okay. 7 minutes and we are good. During your job interview or office, that a couple of people Okay, sounds like a good discussion. Oh, you're on mute.
It seems like it. I'm not. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble.
That's okay. There's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to manage at once in here.
Well, yeah, but I can't even, you know, it never would open up the break room.
Yeah. Those they happen at the worst of times. Over in my room next to me here, it's with Sarah. She's doing her session right now. She had run through her session like a dozen times, never once had an issue with video cameras, and she couldn't get it to connect for anything. She had to go find a second camera.
Jeez.
So, you know, they happen. They happen.
Brandon, it's Jane.
Yes.
Can you put me in a breakout room?
Yeah, you actually should have an option on your screen. Let me see. I might have to pull you out of the line.
Okay, breakout rooms. All right.
Yep.
Thank you. I didn't know that. I'm still learning.
No problem.
So here's just an FYI. I automatically went into a breakout room, and if someone joined the session after I had posted the questions, they won't see them. So fortunately, somebody who was there earlier was able to paste them in and so forth, but hopefully that won't be an impediment to people.
So
I'm sure they'll talk about whatever they want to.
That's what I was going to say.
and I should have, let me see here. Oh, and I should have asked you before doing that whether you wanted to go to breakout rooms, but I didn't want to delay things too much.
Oh, quite all right.
Things.
No worries. They reminded me that often people will, students will speak less when the instructor is there. So I said, not to worry, I'm only going to stay a minute to make sure they're set up.
Yeah,
Nice.
I did the same thing. How many groups are there so we know how many?
There are 7 groups. 1, 2, 3. 3 of them have 7 people, and the rest have 6.
Okay, perfect.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so you got seven groups to call on for their comments.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to have them, just as a reminder, I'm going to have them paste them in the chat
Sure.
for all to see, and then I'll call on them
Is
to
there
share. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way to save this chat before we leave so that we can take a look at it?
Yep, absolutely. Just remind me at the very end before we close
Okay.
things out.
Oh, sorry. Hold on one second.
And then if you, actually, I can provide you the file right in that chat box so you can download.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Yep.
Because I'd really like to see what they've said.
Sure. So there's only 2 minutes 45 seconds left
Okay, that's fine.
in those breakouts. Now, another thing I didn't ask. I didn't realize. I've never done the polls in here before, so I didn't know it was going to pop up. They are ready to go.
Okay.
I assumed that all 3 questions would come up at the same time. Is that correct?
I think so. When we tested
so that's
it,
the easiest way to do it, or else I need to create a new poll
Yeah.
every single time.
When we tested it, I'm not guaranteeing anything today.
Yeah. Well, no. Let me rephrase that. I know they will pop up at the same time. My question is, do you want them to pop up all at the same time?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So they can just get through
I
it.
should have phrased it differently.
Okay.
Janet?
So I can't share my screen again.
Let me, since we're going to be done with the breakouts at this point, I'm going to go back and make you a co-host, so now you can share your screen.
Okay.
It's just that now I'm maintaining the breakout authority.
That works for me. I'm happy with that. Obviously.
Janet, I'm just going to mention, I'm not going to call on people to speak aloud. I think that will be too complicated, especially for the time that we have left.
Okay.
So I'm just going to have them posted into the chat and review, and I'll pull out a couple of common threads.
So we've
There's
got
so
40
many people. I know, but there's so many people, and I can't see everybody at once. I can't see who's raising their hand and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
If you want them to do a quick summary of what their group said, you can just ask them, you know, by group to, you know,
Okay.
just make a quick comment.
Yes.
About what
Okay.
their group said.
Sure.
That way you kind of have finished it off and it won't take long because they can just tell them to pop in when one's finished, the next group person
Okay.
should say something.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Brandon, for all your help. This
Yes,
has been
thank you.
amazing the way you've set this up.
Oh my goodness, that's the truth.
I'm going to cry come Thursday night when this is over.
Oh,
This is one of those things where you just kind of keep on going and going and going, and when it's all over, it's just like you crash.
Yep. So hopefully you have some time to yourself after this is over.
Nope. I'm executive director of the International Association for Conflict Management as well.
Oh my
and
goodness.
That conference takes place 10 days after this one. Same deal.
Oh my goodness.
No.
Yeah. We were supposed to be in Charleston, and that was
Is there a synchronous or asynchronous?
that would be synchronous.
That's really a lot of work. I think asynchronous for the.
Okay. I'm going to close out all the rooms, okay? Time's up.
Excellent.
Great.
Bye.
Oh, it's giving them a 60-second countdown for some reason.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right.
That might have been an odd option I set. I didn't maybe understand it when I was doing it.
It gave us 30 seconds, so everybody should be here soon.
Yeah. So, Janet and Catherine,
yes.
You can. I mean, this. You know, it's obviously a very lively discussion and everything. You can extend this another 10 minutes.
Okay, if we need to. Yeah.
Like, yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
But come 15 minutes after.
Of course.
Yeah. I really need to, cleanse the room and all that.
No, that's all right.
Yeah. We'll try to make it
attentive.
on time because people, they have expectations. So.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end, Brandon, you just want me to remind you about saving the chat, right?
Yeah, just at the very end. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
meant.
I'll hang out in here longer, but everybody's back, so you're good to roll.
Okay. Catherine?
All right, great. So we're all back, looks like. Okay, good. So we realized that was a very brief period, and hopefully you'll be able to continue your conversations about this in other ways, but and throughout this session too. But what we'd like for you to do is, for the person who summarized the group's discussion, if you even got to that point, if you have summarized it in your own chat, you can copy and paste it into the chat again, and then everyone in this session will be able to see it. Or if you want to type in just a quick few notes about what your group discussed, or any learnings, insights, questions that emerged, anything from the dialogue that you want to share with the entire group, please feel free to type that in now. And then if anybody would like to speak about their group's experience, please feel free to raise your hand. Hopefully I can see, I've got the participants list up, and should be able to look for hands raised. Carlos.
Yeah. Well, I just want to share quickly what we discussed. We only went over 2 of the prompts that you guys gave us.
Sure.
One of the things that we agree is that by default, we tend to teach subjects or courses that are, with a lot of emotional content. It could go from even teaching international business to HR. So it's kind of easy to incorporate those emotional elements. I mentioned at some point that maybe using videos. And one of my colleagues, Monica, she mentioned that she shared about experiences in applying for jobs when she teach HR.
Yes.
John says that one of the ways that he incorporates the reflection element into these online courses is definitely that in discussion boards, he asked them to at least respond to one question related to their reflection on the particular topic.
Oh, great.
That's all that we got.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carlos. Those are fantastic ideas. And it sounds like you all are already doing quite a lot of the integration of the social and emotional aspects too. Fantastic. I saw that Kelly had her hand up. Kelly, did you want to speak?
Sure. I just put some of it into the chat, but we talked about pronouns, as you can see in my name. I just renamed myself when I came in to include my pronouns, and it's a nice way to be inclusive with your classes. We also spent most of the time talking, so this was the last question about diversity and words and such. We talked about land acknowledgements and the importance of acknowledging Indigenous people's land that you are occupying. And Deborah posted some links in the chat about how you might do that, how you can find what land your college is on, as well as how you can put it in your wording for syllabi and things like that. So that's about all we had time for.
Sure, we know it was super brief, but those are wonderful resources. Thank you so much for sharing them, and Kelly for sharing your group's discussion too. Any other hands? Anybody else want to speak about their group's experience? I'm seeing some wonderful summaries too. Let me just point out a couple of things. So Gary said their team focused on reflection. Students find it difficult, see it as busy work, it stays superficial, and so some ideas they had were to really make it relevant and more meaningful, such as interviewing a business person about how some issues impacting on their business, possibly an assignment on privilege, service learning activities, with the acknowledgement that doing all of this can lead to a heavy grading load. Absolutely, that's true. And although we don't get so much into how to streamline feedback and make it sort of help you work smarter, we might say, in terms of giving feedback and grading, that is something that we do address in our book. So just a little FYI. Great, let me see if there's a couple more things I want to
So Wanda, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, sorry, please go ahead, Wanda.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, yes, great.
Hey, one of my colleagues mentioned something I agree with. We refer to death by PowerPoint, but there can be death by video too. If all the videos have the professor in it. I personally like to do virtual field trips, but I found prior to including that in my live chat, I have to send them a message to make sure they have their headphones. Because we're going to leave the platform and we're going to take a virtual field trip and we're going to watch a video with someone else in it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, I
that's
love
good.
that idea. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I definitely agree with you that sometimes the professor lecturing or you know, doing all the videos can get a little bit repetitive for students too. And I love the idea of going somewhere else, but making sure that everybody's technology is working first. Thank you so much for that one.
Sure.
Great. I think we have time for one more. If anybody wants to raise their hand and speak. Sorry, I have to scroll down and make sure I don't miss it.
Tim, I see your.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So one of the things we talked about, and I felt like I should share it with everybody, is a piece of technology called Flipgrid. If you've never used it, it's well worth doing. Because we took the first prompt about cognitive, emotional, and social.
Mm-hmm.
I teach an interesting class. It's called Crisis Analysis and Homeland Security for Military Officers.
Oh, wow.
And at one point, rather than putting out something about the cognitive part, I just put out a Flipgrid post. How are you feeling emotionally right now about what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
I said I needed a 3 to 5 minute video. I got 7 to 10 minutes from everybody, and then 5 to 6 minutes of people responding to each other. So it's not about me. It's about Flipgrid that is so excellent to allow us to not only see, but hear our students.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that recommendation. That's fantastic. And I'll add that the combination of good technology with great ideas and great prompts for self-reflection and for asking students about their emotional reactions and so forth is a really powerful combination. So thank you for illustrating that so nicely.
It was very good. And you know, Catherine, the group that I was with, what they're doing is they're making sure that the students feel free to share their reflections. And that was important. So it's not graded except for participation.
Yes.
And that worked out really well. And they had different ways of doing it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Wendy, for sharing that. I'm glad you were in a group too. Good. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to turn things over to Wendy, but thank you all for your fantastic chats. We are going to be saving the chat too. So we'll be able to, I hope, share a record of that so everybody has access to those ideas.
It is very good. And I'm going to do a time check right now. So am I accurate in seeing we've got about 14 minutes left, but we can, according to Brandon,
We have 30 minutes left.
We have 30 minutes left. Okay,
Yes.
good to know. All righty, because I was going to make a switch on how much I was going to present. So let's look next at the Change-adept Course Creation Process and how it can guide flexible course design. So the Change-adept Course Creation Process is iterative, it is flexible, and it's nonlinear. It's also interactive. Interaction happens when you discuss your design with colleagues. The process can easily move in different directions, as you can tell by the arrows, depending on what you discover from your own self-reflection and dialogue with others. Your design changes when you're open to discovering even better methods for your students to learn. And points, as you can see in this design process, include prepare, because you're going to prepare yourself and your course in order to create engaging learning. And think about your learners and how you teach. Be ready to change and discover more about your learners, or as you discover more about your learners. Then you're going to create interactive experiences and revise. All righty. So I'd like you to be thinking about, as we look at this process, reflect on how you do this in your own course, to prepare it and to design it. So in prepare, consider what this means in your course. How you as an educator believe your students learn. Now to do this, examine your view of teaching and learning, because your view of yourself as an educator and what learning means in your course and how learning takes place guides how you build your online course. Catherine spoke about this, and now in this process, you're going to see how your beliefs as a facilitator or as a teacher and an educator influence your course design. For example, if you see yourself as a facilitator of learning, you'll be present in your course and will design, most likely, will design activities that help your students interact, to reflect on the information they take in from the course resources, to discuss the information from resources in order to share understanding and practice what they've learned in realistic, meaningful situations. An instructor may believe in doing all of this as a facilitator of learning, but may not really build this into his or her course. If an instructor depends on lectures and PowerPoints, you'll see a disconnect between what they believe in and what they actually do in their online courses. So your course design should align with your beliefs about education and how your students learn in an online environment. This is an awareness that you develop as you analyze how you, or think about, reflect on how you see yourself as an educator and your course. As you prepare to design your course, think about what you want your course to do for your students and what your students need as adult learners. What can get them to their personal and professional goals they hope to achieve in your course? And this is what you plan to put into your learning experiences. So as you prepare, remember adult learning principles that Catherine went over and the cognitive and social and emotional aspects of your learning experience. So for instance, your willingness to be present, as we've mentioned, and part of the interaction in your course. It will make your course meaningful to your students who might otherwise feel isolated, because students often come into your course feeling isolated. Interaction among peers and realistic opportunities to practice and get meaningful feedback contribute to your online learning environment that you build for your students. Now let's think about the opposite for a minute. You may have experienced this and you would not want this for your students. It's quite possible for an instructor to set up a course that's almost automatic completion. That means asynchronous resources are uploaded, there are no opportunities to reflect, discussion is reduced to a count of postings, activities are rote practice set to superficial rubrics based on a count of instances. Evaluation may be automated with pre-recorded feedback, one size fits all. And the only survey for the student voices is after the fact, the institution's end of semester feedback, which is too late to change anything. A course without preparation and insight into how you view online learning experiences miss meaningful opportunities to learn. So as you think about this, reflect on opportunities for your students to learn in your online course. Next, we come to create. And in create, during create, you implement your plan of design, knowing that you'll discover ways to improve as you do this, and you may need to slide on back to prepare and think more, rethink your design. And that's okay. Make your learning experience you build realistic, relevant, meaningful, interactive. These are the elements of adult learning that also support cognitive, social, and emotional aspects. And when you plan a resource, such as reading a video, reading or a video of your lecture, you've offered information and knowledge. And you can make these resources engaging, chunked, with ways to reflect built in. However, resources are not complete learning. It's fact and information acquisition. Well, they're not always the complete way of learning. Learning occurs when you create self-reflection on opportunities to think. For instance, a student considers their prior knowledge and how best to learn and apply their knowledge. Learning occurs when you create interaction and discussion, sharing ideas and reaching shared understanding. And believe me, this doesn't mean that everyone thinks the same, but students understand points of view, including their own, through this conversation. And give adult learners a chance to practice the skills using the knowledge they've acquired in the resources, reflection, and discussion, so that they are in realistic practice. And in this realistic, engaging practice, for instance, a paper can be set in a scenario that would realistically require an article, a report, or other product. So this helps your learners to imagine using the skills and knowledge they learn in other settings that might exist for them after the course is over. practice can be realistic, relevant, meaningful, and memorable, think of the different ways in your course that it can be this way. And think about this. How do you remember TV ads from childhood? They may be memorable stories that portray realistic social interactions. Stop and think about ads that you remember. In 30 to 60 seconds, they were able to tell you about a product, where you can buy it, what it is, how to use it, who else uses it, and they really sell you on using it. So how do they do this? They use social situations and images, and it's what they're doing with that time that they have. So make it interactive, combine social and emotional. Think about what Catherine told us about the cognitive, social, and emotional aspects, and reflect on how you help your students to do this. On the next slide, we're looking at an example, a course designed for management skills that is a scenario. Just a second. I've been talking so much I made myself a bit dizzy. All right, back to it. So you see this scenario right here. And I'd like you to think about it in terms of your own course. This is actually, well, I'll get to that in a minute. Since adults want to know why they need to learn something, provide a clear rationale for why information and learning activities are relevant. This scenario is an authentic professional setting. In it, guide your learners to reflect and draw from their own prior knowledge. Let them identify the emotional and social value for themselves and the person they want to be at the end of the activity. And this can be done through a reflection journal, discussion, other responses in the scenario. So find the opportunities. And by the way, it doesn't have to fall right after they take in resource material. Your reflection times can be anywhere where it makes sense. Okay, offer group and peer-to-peer realistic interaction that allows them to share understanding. We talked about this. How are you going to do it? Well, in this example, you can see that discussion can be at intervals in the scenario, like team planning meetings. Make it make sense. So when would they naturally discuss things? And here's a design tip. You can use characters, and this is why you see a picture of someone there. Because you can use the simplest of characters. It doesn't have to be fancy or evoking character, although those are marvelous. You can just use a simple image and have the person do different, and not a student. You're going to use someone who's okay with your using their image with different poses and different comments underneath the pose. And whatever LMS system you have, it is probably going to allow you to have an image with a caption underneath it. And that's what you can use. So here she could say, for instance, something like, are you sure you read your syllabus? I'll give you a minute to go back and reread it. So you can do a lot of things with these. Now, I've seen faculty use images as TAs, teaching assistants, who are in the beginning of the course, in a start here section to help welcome the students and give them the information that is in the syllabus, but maybe the students didn't read, and give them this information in a way that they will listen to. I had one professor say, you know, it freed up my teaching time. It freed it up so much because these things that students always end up asking me about were answered by the character. And this faculty member ended up bringing in 2 students who were able to show students how to ask questions. And when a test came, one of the little character students said, you know, I bombed my test, should I just drop? And so the TA was able to guide the student to the professor. At any rate, when we stop and think about these things, you can do a lot in a scenario. And your scenario, by the way, can start at the beginning of the course. And the scenario can start as you're getting a job as you are an intern for this semester, a pretend intern in this pretend company or hospital or what have you. And each time the scenario can actually start before they do their reading or take in their resources, because it can give meaning to it, give it a purpose. So that's the adult learning theory coming in there. Okay, organization, we talked about everything there for a reason, just like you would do if you're in theater, in a play. Every movement, every speech has a reason. And talk to your students. Don't say students will, but really talk to your students in that little area of text that you have available to yourself, and use semiotics. You remember Catherine explained it. Everything in your course, from your text to your images, everything has meaning, and it might not have the same meaning that you intend. So use that as a way to filter through and examine what you're putting in for your students. Let's see, at this point, let's move on to revise and revise continuously. Revise may look like it's one phase out at the end, but it's really not, because you'll always go back and revise. So here are some ways to do it. Self-reflect and keep a journal. Discuss your course design with a colleague. Survey students. Ask your students at any interval. You don't have to wait until the end. Certain things that you want to know about an activity or the design of the course. Look at your analytics and evaluations in your course and institution. So analytics can be anything from an item analysis that is provided to see what questions are always wrong, to how long your students spend on different activities. And the more engaging your activities, you might find that they spend longer. I had one student tell me when he found out that I worked with a faculty to design the course that he takes, he said, you know, when I take this course, my wife comes and sits next to me because it's so much fun. Another it was where a biology instructor said, I had, after a test, she had used scenarios. I had a student come and say, I wasn't trying to remember what page I read the answer to the question on. I knew it because I lived it in the scenarios. So that's my little sales spiel to you on scenarios. And with that, let's move on. And I'd like to you to think, please, consider the points you consider per phase. Prepare and plan how your students will learn, create the course, and revise continuously. So thinking about these points, let's go on to the next slide. And please share. And you'll be using, as whole group, if you'll type into the chat section the answers that you have when you stop and think about these two questions. Which one of these phases do you need to spend more time on to improve your online course? And how will you integrate adult learning principles into that phase? And I'm excited about going and looking through your answers now. Go right ahead. Jingles, I like that. Yes, connect to work experiences. Thank you, Gordon. Yeah, Paul, thank you. Engagement is the key concern. Yeah, those activities. And sometimes you'll find that the activities that you can do online, you wouldn't be able to do as richly in a face-to-face. And you may find when this year is over that if you go back to face-to-face, you'll really use a hybrid and a flipped approach so that you can use the richness of your online.
I do have one face-to-face World Trade game that I use that the students rave about at the end of the semester, and they're 400 level capstone students. I cannot figure out how to put it online. I've got to work that out. They cut pieces of paper out in shapes and trade them.
Okay, well, right in Zoom, if you're using Zoom, There are limited, of course, shapes that your students can use in teams. You can use breakout rooms for it, and I know that you can paste text into a whiteboard. Actually, I'm talking about a whiteboard. I'm not sure that you can paste in images, but again, the Flipgrid, you might be able to have them do things with Flipgrid with that online. I think you're going to have a fun adventure discovering how you can do an equivalent to that activity. Different, yes. Online offers different, but not inferior benefits. Thank you for that. And same thing, face-to-face neither of them is superior to the other format. It's just you can do different things with them. Okay. And so with using it online, you might find that World Trade Game has something online already. Watch out for copyright and all on things. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so thank you, Wendy. I think we will now review what we talked about, maybe. So we're going to look at connections in your learnings through reflection and review. So to go back to what we started with, which was our course session destination, or course session destination, through self-reflection and dialogue with colleagues, you can begin to apply adult learning principles to your online course, designing Change-adept course creation process, using Change-adept course creation process. So by now you actually should have some idea about what these words mean, having heard from Catherine and Wendy. As we continue this review, consider whether or not you think we reached this destination. So, talking about adult learning principles that Catherine introduced, these principles incorporate our view of learning, which includes three aspects, cognitive, social, and emotional, and all three aspects must be present for learning to occur. The learning process includes self-reflection and dialogue, which leads to shared understanding. Adult learning assumptions, or andragogy, outline ways to engage adult learners in experiential application of skills to content that is realistic, relevant, and meaningful in certain situations. The adult learning principles also include careful attention to semiotics to foster the inclusion of diverse learners. Next, Wendy discussed the Change-adept course creation process, which follows a general pattern of prepare, create, and revise. It's important to remember that this is a general pattern because the process is iterative, flexible, interactive, and nonlinear. Prepare includes preparing yourself so that you're aware of your beliefs and assumptions about teaching and learning and how they influence your approach. Prepare also includes preparing your course. Preparing your course includes such elements as identifying the overall course goal or destination, understanding your learner's context, identifying topics and their connections, determining which skill areas you plan to include in your course. Create includes creating learning activities that incorporate adult learning principles. Due to time constraints of this session, Wendy mainly focused on creating learning activities, but also mentioned the elements of identifying appropriate course resources, planning feedback, including the type of feedback and how and when you give feedback. Developing course structure is another important element of Create that includes determining how you welcome your students to your course, and also determining the overall course layout, including course modules. Revise is based on feedback from your students, your observation, and your experiences in teaching the course. As you go through the course creation process, it's important to remember that there is a direct connection between the adult learning principles and the Change-adept course creation process. Both are intertwined as they guide and inform each other and you as you create your course. Now let's take a moment to reflect on the following two questions. What was your most important learning for this session, and how will you apply that learning to your course? So take a couple of minutes to think about that, and then also post those reflections on the chat. When you've finished, also review other people's postings, and we'll give a quick review then. Okay, so I'm seeing several things come up in here, including thanks to each other as participants on your ideas that you've shared, which I think is wonderful. And also looking at the emotional aspects, the models, and ways on the emotional aspects to share feelings with their students and connections. Engagement seems to be of great interest. So I thank you all. Thank you for this. So those are really good things, really good comments. The last piece, or one of the last pieces before we get to Q&A, is we're going to ask you, we're going to answer 3 questions in an anonymous survey, just to kind of get a sense of where you're at and what you're thinking. So I'm going to launch the poll now. And if you will, just go ahead and answer the questions. There's, as I said, there's 3. And once you have finished, I will share the results. So click on the ones that you have. Thank you. Okay, great. I'm going to end the polling at this point, and we will share the results with you. As you can see, it looked like most of you were definitely thinking that you would apply the adult learning principles, the learning process, and the adult learning assumptions. And some of you are also interested in semiotics. As far as the session destination, the majority of you agreed or strongly agreed that we met or reached that destination. And in terms of the course creation process, it looks like the majority agreed or strongly agreed that this was a useful guide, and some of you are still thinking about it, which is fine. Okay, so thank you for participating in that. The next piece is to look at question and answer. So here, what I'd ask you to do is post any questions or comments you have in the chat, and we will, if we have time, because we're running out of time, try to answer those as quickly as we can. While you're thinking about your questions that you may have, we want to introduce our book that we've already mentioned to you. It's called The New Roadmap for Creating Online Courses, an Interactive Workbook. The content for this session was taken from the book. The book is written for higher ed faculty, but can also be used to create online courses for adult learners in any situation. It is grounded in learning theory and research, but as promised by the title, is an interactive workbook that guides you through the Change-adept course creation process as you prepare, create, and revise your course. Now, let's see what questions we might have. Okay. Okay. So Catherine, Wendy, you want to jump in on any comments on the question or on the comments in the chat?
I'll just say quickly that someone, and I apologize, I have to scroll back to see who it was, but somebody mentioned the idea of building courses around skill development. And that's something that we are actually very passionate about, not to neglect content necessarily, of course, but to really integrate explicitly the development of skills, sometimes thought of as soft skills, but we think that they're more than soft skills, into a course too. So that is something that we address in the book, and we'd love to have further conversation with you about that idea.
Okay, so we have 1 minute left. So I think we've reached our course. Brandon, if you could save the chat for us. Really, thank you guys for attending the session today. Hope that you got something out of it that you can use, and we wish you great success as you create your online courses. Thank you very much.